Taurus, I hope you're ready because what I'm picking up on today feels unlike anything this person has experienced in a very long time. The energy is intense, it's emotional, and honestly, it feels like someone is struggling to keep their feelings under control. The more I tune into this connection, the more it feels like their heart is moving faster than their mind can keep up with. They're trying to make sense of what they're feeling, but something keeps pulling them back to you. So today, we're going to take a look at what's really happening beneath the surface and why this connection seems to be growing stronger instead of fading away. Welcome, my beautiful Taurus friends. I'm so thankful you're here with me today. My name is Henry, and let's see what the cards have to say. Okay. The moment I turned over these cards, I have to say, something immediately stood out to me. There is a person here who has spent a long time trying to stay logical about this connection. A long time trying to convince themselves that they could keep moving forward without fully looking at what was happening in their heart. But that energy isn't holding together the way it used to. The Judgment card is sitting here, and the feeling coming from it is strong. Not dramatic, not chaotic, just impossible to ignore. It's almost like this person keeps finding themselves in moments where they suddenly think about you for no obvious reason. They could be busy, they could be surrounded by people, they could have 100 other things demanding their attention. Yet somehow, your energy slips through. And what I'm getting is that this isn't happening once or twice. This has become a pattern. You know, there are some connections that people can put on a shelf. They can distract themselves. They can stay busy. Eventually, the feelings become quieter. This doesn't feel like that. The more they try to push it aside, the louder it becomes. The more they tell themselves they're fine, the more they realize they're not. And that's where this awakening seems to be happening. I keep getting the feeling that they're starting to look back at moments they once dismissed. Conversations they brushed off. Things you said that didn't fully register at the time. What's interesting here is that they aren't looking at those memories the same way anymore. Something has changed. It's almost as if they're replaying certain moments with a completely different understanding. And I think that's why the Judgment card keeps pulling my attention. Because this person is beginning to see something they couldn't see before. For some of you, this may even feel surprising, because this individual hasn't always been very expressive. They haven't always shown the depth of what was happening underneath. In fact, I feel like there were times when they appeared completely unaffected, times when they seemed distant, times when they acted as though everything was normal. But underneath all of that, there was far more going on than they ever admitted. Then I see the Hierophant card, and the energy shifts, not in a rushed way, not in a reckless way. Actually, it becomes more serious, more grounded, more thoughtful. I keep hearing the words, what does this really mean? Because that's the question they're asking themselves. What does Taurus mean to me? Why does this connection continue to stay with me? Why does it feel different from other situations I've experienced? Why can't I just move on from it? And the more they ask those questions, the more difficult it becomes to avoid the answers. I don't necessarily feel like this person woke up one day and suddenly understood everything. No, this feels much slower than that. This feels like somebody gradually realizing that their feelings have become deeper than they expected. And I think that realization makes them nervous. Because once you acknowledge something is real, you can't really go back to pretending it isn't. That's what keeps coming through. They're reaching a point where denial isn't working anymore. Okay, and then we have the Star card. Wow. The energy around this card feels incredibly emotional. Not emotional in the sense of tears or heartbreak, more like longing, hope, the feeling of looking towards something that matters. I keep getting the image of somebody sitting alone with their thoughts after everything becomes quiet, no distractions, no noise, just them and whatever they've been carrying inside. And somehow that's when Taurus shows up. That's when your memory appears. That's when your voice comes back into their mind. That's when they start wondering about you. I feel like they've tried to understand why this keeps happening, why you continue to have such a strong presence in their thoughts. But the more they analyze it, the more they realize this isn't something they can explain away. Because this isn't only about attraction. It's deeper than attraction. It's the comfort they felt around you, the connection they felt with you. The way you made them see parts of themselves they don't usually show the world. And honestly, I think that's part of what scares them. Because being seen can feel vulnerable. Being understood can feel vulnerable, especially for somebody who has spent a lot of time protecting their heart. Then, the Chariot card comes into view. And this is where the energy becomes very interesting. Because for the first time, I don't just see somebody thinking. I see somebody trying to gain clarity, trying to figure out what to do with everything they're feeling. The attraction is stronger. The awareness is stronger. The emotions are stronger. And the part that keeps standing out to me is that they're no longer asking whether these feelings exist. That question has already been answered. Now they're trying to understand what these feelings actually mean. And that's a very different place to be. Because when someone reaches that point, the connection stops being something they occasionally think about. It becomes something they carry with them, something they notice, something they feel, something that follows them throughout the day, no matter how hard they try to focus elsewhere. The strongest thing I'm picking up right now is that this person may have spent a long time trying to stay ahead of their emotions, trying to stay in control, trying to convince themselves they knew exactly where they stood. But their heart is telling a different story now. And little by little, that story is becoming impossible for them to ignore. Because the deeper I go into this energy, the more I realize that what is holding this person back isn't a lack of feelings. It's not a lack of attraction. It's not even confusion about how important Taurus is to them. What keeps showing up is fear, and I have to be honest, this fear feels old. Much older than this connection. The moon's card is here, and the atmosphere around it feels heavy in a very specific way. Not heavy because something bad is happening, but heavy because there are emotions this person has been carrying for so long that they almost don't know who they are without them. I keep getting the feeling that this individual learned a long time ago not to trust too easily. Maybe they trusted the wrong people. Maybe they gave their heart away and watched it get mishandled. Maybe they believed promises that never turned into actions. Whatever happened, it left a mark. And what's interesting is that I don't think they talk about it very often. This doesn't feel like somebody who sits around discussing their pain with everyone they meet. This feels like somebody who learned how to survive by keeping certain wounds hidden. You know, some people become louder after they've been hurt. This person became quieter, more guarded, more careful. And the strange thing is that those walls worked for a while. They helped them avoid disappointment. They helped them avoid vulnerability. But now those same walls are becoming a problem because they aren't just keeping pain out anymore. They're keeping genuine connection out too. The Nine of Swords is pulling my attention now. This card feels restless. I keep seeing someone lying awake long after everything around them has settled down. Not because they're busy, not because they're distracted, because their mind won't stop. There's a conversation constantly happening inside their head. Questions, regrets, what-ifs, things they wish they had handled differently, things they wish they had understood sooner. And I think Taurus shows up in those thoughts more often than they would ever admit. Not because they're obsessed, not because they're unable to move forward. It's deeper than that. It's because this connection seems to touch places inside them that other people don't reach. The way this is coming through feels very personal, almost uncomfortable. Because Taurus didn't simply enter their life. You challenged something. You exposed something. You made them look at parts of themselves they usually avoid. And that's where this becomes complicated. Because healing sounds beautiful until somebody actually has to do it. Healing means looking at things you've spent years running from. Healing means acknowledging truths that are easier to ignore. Healing means accepting that some of the pain you're carrying isn't coming from the present moment at all. And I think this person is starting to understand that. The Five of Pentacles is here, and the feeling attached to it is loneliness. Not the kind of loneliness that comes from being physically alone. The kind that comes from feeling misunderstood. The kind that comes from believing nobody really sees what you're carrying. I keep hearing the words, "you wouldn't understand." Almost as if this person has spent years telling themselves that nobody could truly understand their situation. Nobody could understand why they react the way they do. Nobody could understand why they shut down. Nobody could understand why they pull away whenever something starts feeling real. But Taurus, I think part of what unsettles them is that you understand more than they expected. Maybe not every detail, maybe not every secret, but enough. Enough to make them feel seen. And that can be scary for someone who's used to hiding. Okay, the Hermit card just changed the energy again. Everything becomes quieter here, more reflective. I don't see somebody rushing around looking for answers. I see somebody stepping back, observing, thinking, trying to make sense of their own heart. And honestly, I think that's where they are more than anything right now. Trying to understand themselves. Trying to understand why this connection keeps surviving every attempt to ignore it. Why certain memories continue to resurface. Why certain emotions continue to return. Why Taurus still matters. I feel like this person has entered a period where they're questioning a lot of things. Old beliefs, old habits, old patterns. The way they've always handled relationships. The way they've always protected themselves. Because something isn't fitting together anymore. The old version of themselves knows how to stay safe. but it doesn't know how to be happy. And that realization feels important. Because sometimes growth begins when somebody realizes that survival and fulfillment are not the same thing. The card that keeps pulling everything together for me is death. And no, this doesn't feel dramatic. It doesn't feel destructive. It feels necessary. Very necessary. I keep getting the image of someone standing in front of a closed door they've been staring at for years. A door they always knew existed. A door they never wanted to open. Because opening it means confronting everything on the other side. But something is changing. The resistance isn't as strong as it used to be. The excuses aren't as convincing as they used to be. The distractions aren't working the way they used to. And little by little, this person is beginning to understand that the version of themselves who first entered this connection may not be the same version who walks forward from it. There's still hesitation here. There's still uncertainty. But underneath all of that, I can feel movement. Quiet movement. Internal movement. The kind that nobody sees right away. The kind that starts deep within a person's heart, long before anything changes on the outside. And the more I sit with this energy, the more it feels like someone who is finally becoming willing to face what they've spent a very long time avoiding. Because once somebody begins letting down those walls, even a little bit, they start noticing things they weren't paying attention to before. And what keeps coming through here is how different Taurus feels compared to everything else they've experienced. Okay, this is interesting. The energy suddenly softens, not because all of their fears disappear, not because all of their questions have been answered. It's more like they're finding moments of peace in the middle of all that noise. The Sun card is here, and I keep getting this feeling that whenever life becomes overwhelming, whenever everything feels complicated, their mind somehow drifts back to you. Not intentionally, not because they're forcing it, it just happens. You know how certain people leave an impression on your life that stays long after the conversation ends? That's what this feels like. It's almost as if Taurus has become a place in their mind that they return to when they're trying to remember what genuine happiness feels like. And I don't mean excitement. I don't mean obsession. I mean peace, real peace. The kind that allows somebody to exhale after holding tension in their body for far too long. I keep seeing this person surrounded by responsibilities, obligations, expectations from other people. They're constantly trying to manage something, fix something, figure something out. But when their thoughts move towards you, everything seems to slow down for a moment. The pressure eases. The noise fades. And I think that's one of the reasons this connection continues to stay with them. Because Taurus doesn't just make them feel wanted. Taurus makes them feel safe. And I have to be honest, I don't think safety is something they've experienced consistently in their life. The Queen of Cups is sitting here now, and the energy feels incredibly gentle. There's something about the way they experience your presence that is difficult for them to explain. I don't think it's about perfection. I don't think they see you as somebody who never makes mistakes. It's deeper than that. It's the feeling that they can be themselves around you. Or at least they sense that possibility. The possibility of not having to wear a mask. The possibility of not having to constantly defend themselves. The possibility of being understood without needing to explain every little thing. And for somebody who has spent so much of their life protecting their heart, that feeling can be incredibly powerful. Sometimes people don't realize how much they're carrying until they meet someone who makes the burden feel lighter. That's what keeps coming through. I don't think Taurus necessarily solved all of their problems. I think Taurus simply showed them a different emotional experience. One where they didn't have to be in survival mode all the time. One where they could lower their guard. One where they could just exist without constantly preparing for disappointment. And that's why this energy feels so significant. Because now they're comparing everything else to that feeling. The Ace of Cups appears, and wow, the emotion attached to this card feels much deeper than they're comfortable admitting. I keep hearing them ask themselves questions they never expected to ask. Questions about what they truly want. Questions about what actually matters. Questions about who they become when they're around Taurus. Because here's the thing. There are connections that stay on the surface. They come and go, they create memories and eventually fade away. This doesn't feel like one of those connections. This feels like something that continued growing underneath the surface even when they weren't paying attention. And now they're becoming aware of just how much space these feelings occupy inside them. The strange part is that I don't think this realization happened all at once. It feels gradual. 100 small moments. 100 little reminders. 100 times they thought they were overthinking things, only to find themselves right back here again. Thinking about Taurus. Wondering about Taurus. Missing Taurus. Trying to understand why. The Six of Cups is here, and the memories are becoming impossible to ignore. I keep seeing random moments resurfacing. Things that probably seemed ordinary at the time. A conversation, a smile, a shared joke, a look, a message. Something simple. But now those moments carry a different weight. They're revisiting memories they haven't looked at in a while. And what's fascinating is that they're seeing them differently now. The emotional distance that once existed is shrinking. The differences are softer. The perspective is changing. So memories that once felt ordinary suddenly feel meaningful. Memories that once felt casual suddenly feel important. It's almost like they're discovering hidden layers inside experiences they thought they already understood. And I think that's part of why these feelings continue growing. Because every time they revisit the past, they uncover something new. Another reason why Taurus mattered. Another reason why this connection felt different. Another reason why letting go wasn't as easy as they expected. Okay, and now the Four of Wands is stepping forward. The atmosphere around this card feels warm, comfortable, familiar. I keep getting the feeling that when this person imagines stability, when they imagine feeling settled emotionally, Taurus somehow appears in that picture. Not because they've mapped out every detail, not because they've planned everything. It's simply the feeling. The feeling of belonging, the feeling of being welcomed, the feeling of being able to put down emotional baggage for a while and just exist beside someone who understands them. And that's where things become very real for this person. Because the more they allow themselves to feel these emotions, the harder it becomes to dismiss them as temporary. The connection is starting to move beyond attraction, beyond curiosity, beyond simple interest. It's reaching deeper places now. Places connected to trust, places connected to comfort, places connected to emotional security. And as these realizations continue unfolding inside them, I keep feeling like they're beginning to understand something about Taurus that they weren't fully ready to see before. Something about that realization feels impossible for them to shake off. Not because Taurus is demanding answers. Not because Taurus is forcing anything. It's because they're starting to recognize patterns they overlooked before. And once a person begins seeing things clearly, it's hard to return to the version of the story they were telling themselves. The first card pulling my attention here is Justice. And I have to say, this energy feels very different from where they were emotionally before. There's a sense of honesty developing inside them. Not necessarily honesty they're sharing with everyone else. Honesty with themselves. You know, sometimes people spend so much time explaining away their emotions that they eventually start believing their own explanations. I don't care that much. It doesn't matter. I'm over it. It wasn't that serious. But what I'm seeing now is somebody quietly questioning those statements. Because the facts aren't matching the story anymore. Their heart is telling them one thing. Their actions in the past may have suggested something else. And now they're trying to reconcile the difference. I keep getting the feeling that Taurus said things to this person that stayed with them long after the conversation ended. Words they may have brushed aside in the moment. Observations they weren't ready to hear. Truths that felt uncomfortable. What's interesting is that those same words that keep resurfacing, almost like echoes. Not because Taurus was trying to prove a point, but because there was truth hidden inside what Taurus was saying. And the more time passes, the more that truth seems to reveal itself. Justice feels less like judgment and more like understanding. An understanding that certain situations weren't as simple as they once believed. An understanding that Taurus may have been seeing things from an angle they completely missed. The Hanged Man appears, and immediately I feel a shift in perspective. Not a dramatic shift, a gradual one. The kind that happens quietly while nobody is paying attention. I keep seeing someone replaying old situations from a completely different viewpoint. Moments where they thought they were right. Moments where they thought they understood what was happening. Moments where they felt justified. Only now they're looking at those same experiences through a different lens. And I have to be honest, some of those realizations don't feel easy. Because growth often comes with uncomfortable awareness. The awareness that maybe they weren't listening as carefully as they should have. The awareness that they were so focused on protecting themselves that they missed what someone else was trying to communicate. The awareness that fear may have influenced more decisions than they realized. It's almost like they're standing outside of themselves for the first time, observing rather than reacting, listening rather than defending. And that alone is changing everything. The Queen of Swords is here, and the energy around this card keeps bringing me back to Taurus. Because the way this person remembers you now feels different. They don't just remember your kindness. They don't just remember your warmth. They remember your honesty. They remember the moments when you spoke directly. The moments when you refused to pretend everything was fine. The moments when you challenged them to look deeper. And honestly, I think there were times when that frustrated them. Not because you were wrong, because you were touching subjects they weren't prepared to face. You know what I keep hearing? I thought Taurus was being difficult, and now it's turning into, maybe Taurus was trying to help me see something. That's a very different realization. Because once somebody begins questioning their old assumptions, the entire connection starts to look different. The High Priestess is making this energy even deeper. There are things they're understanding now that nobody had to explain to them. Insights that seem to arrive out of nowhere. Little moments of clarity, little flashes of understanding. I keep getting the feeling that certain pieces of the puzzle are suddenly fitting together. Things Taurus said. Things Taurus noticed. Things Taurus warned them about. At the time, they may have dismissed those observations. They may have thought Taurus was overthinking, overreacting, misunderstanding. But now they're seeing situations unfold in ways that make them pause. And that pause is important because it's creating space for reflection. The strongest thing I'm picking up on is respect. A growing respect for Taurus's perspective. A growing respect for Taurus's intuition. A growing respect for the emotional intelligence Taurus brought into this connection. Not because Taurus was trying to be right. Because Taurus was paying attention to things this person wasn't ready to acknowledge. And that's why I feel some regret here. Not overwhelming regret. Not guilt that consumes them. Just a quiet sadness. The kind that shows up when someone realizes they could have listened more carefully. The kind that appears when someone understands a lesson after the moment has already passed. The Three of Pentacles is sitting here now, and what I love about this energy is that it feels constructive. It doesn't feel stuck. It doesn't feel trapped in the past. It feels like someone trying to understand how everything fits together, how their choices led them here, how Taurus influenced their growth, how this connection continues teaching them things about themselves. Because the deeper they look, the harder it becomes to dismiss the significance of what happened between the two of you. They're beginning to see that this wasn't simply about feelings. It wasn't simply about attraction. There was something meaningful taking place beneath the surface, something that challenged old patterns, something that exposed blind spots, something that encouraged growth even when growth felt uncomfortable. And the more these realizations settle in, the more I feel this person becoming curious about what else they may not have fully understood before. What keeps standing out to me now is that this person doesn't seem interested in staying where they've been emotionally. There is a feeling of movement here, not rushed movement, not impulsive movement, more like somebody finally realizing they can't keep circling the same thoughts forever. The Judgment card is back on the table, and I have to say, it feels very different from when it first appeared. Earlier, it felt like awareness. Now it feels more personal, more direct. Almost like certain truths have moved from the back of their mind into the center of their attention. I keep getting the feeling that this person has reached a point where they can no longer pretend certain feelings aren't there. Not because anyone is forcing them to acknowledge those feelings, because they're showing up everywhere. The connection, the memories, the questions, the emotions, all of it keeps returning. And what's interesting is that they're no longer reacting to those feelings the way they used to. Instead of pushing them away, they're beginning to sit with them. They're beginning to listen. They're beginning to ask themselves why Taurus continues to hold such an important place in their heart. You know, sometimes people spend so much energy trying to avoid an answer that they never realize how much effort the avoidance itself requires. That's what this feels like. Exhaustion. Not from loving Taurus, exhaustion from trying not to, and I think they're becoming aware of that. The Four of Wands appears again, and immediately I feel warmth. Not fantasy, not wishful thinking, warmth, comfort. The kind of feeling somebody gets when they imagine a place where they don't have to be on guard all the time. I keep seeing this person looking at different areas of their life and noticing where things feel disconnected, where things feel empty, where things feel forced. And every time they compare those experiences to what they feel around Taurus, something stands out. There is a sense of ease here, a sense of belonging, a sense that life doesn't have to feel like a constant struggle. I don't think they're imagining perfection. Actually, I think they're becoming more realistic than they've ever been. They're starting to understand that meaningful connections aren't built on perfection. They're built on honesty, trust, consistency, and the ability to be yourself without fear. That's why the energy around Taurus continues to grow instead of disappear. Because what they feel isn't based on illusion, it's based on recognition. Recognition of how different this connection feels from so many others they've experienced.
Okay.
The Ten of Pentacles is here, and this is where the energy becomes incredibly interesting. Because I don't see somebody focused only on emotions anymore. I see somebody beginning to think about their future, not necessarily making decisions overnight, not necessarily having every answer, but asking deeper questions. Questions about where they're going, questions about what kind of life they want, questions about who they genuinely want beside them as they continue moving forward. And somehow Taurus keeps appearing in those reflections. Not because they're forcing Taurus into the picture, because Taurus is already there. I keep getting the feeling that this person is beginning to understand that certain connections are valuable in ways that can't be measured immediately. Sometimes you don't recognize what something means until you've spent enough time without it. Sometimes distance creates perspective. Sometimes silence creates understanding. And what they're discovering feels larger than attraction, larger than chemistry. There's a growing awareness of value. Value in the connection, value in Taurus, value in what the two of you have shared. The Knight of Wands steps forward, and I can feel the energy shifting again. The hesitation isn't completely gone, but it doesn't seem as powerful as it once was. I keep getting flashes of somebody wanting to act, wanting to say something, wanting to break through the distance that has existed between the two of you. Not because they've suddenly become fearless. Honestly, I don't think fear disappears that easily. It's more like their feelings are starting to outweigh the reasons they've been holding themselves back. And that's creating momentum, internal momentum, the kind that starts building quietly before anybody else notices. I also keep getting this sense that they're tired of unfinished chapters, tired of unanswered questions, tired of wondering what could have happened if things had been handled differently. The energy feels restless, not chaotic, restless. Like somebody standing at the edge of a decision they know they can't avoid forever. The World card is bringing a very powerful feeling into the reading. I keep hearing the phrase, "I'm not the same person anymore." Not necessarily spoken out loud, more like something they're beginning to realize. Because the version of themselves that first encountered this connection has gone through changes, experiences, lessons, challenges, growth. And now they're looking back at everything through different eyes. That's why old perspectives are falling away. That's why old excuses aren't fitting the way they used to. Something is ending here, not necessarily the connection. Actually, it feels more like an old cycle inside of them. A cycle of avoidance, a cycle of denial, a cycle of pretending certain emotions didn't matter. The Page of Swords is the final card pulling my attention right now, and I have to smile because this energy feels curious, observant, aware. I keep seeing someone paying closer attention than they usually do, watching, noticing, reflecting, trying to understand, trying to gather pieces of information that help everything make sense. And the strongest thing I'm feeling is that Taurus remains very present in their thoughts while all of this is happening. Not as a passing memory, not as a temporary distraction, but as someone connected to a chapter of their life that they're still trying to fully understand. And the more questions they ask themselves, the more it feels like they're slowly approaching a realization that has been waiting for them for a very long time. All right, Taurus, that's all I have for this reading. And honestly, I feel like this story is still unfolding in ways that may not be completely visible yet. Sometimes clarity arrives little by little, and sometimes the heart understands something long before the mind catches up. Thank you for allowing me to spend this time with you today. I never take your support for granted, and I'm truly grateful that you're here. If this reading resonated with you, take what feels right, leave the rest, and trust yourself above all else. Wishing you nothing but peace, happiness, and beautiful energy moving forward. Thank you again for being here, Taurus. I'll see you in the next reading. Take care of yourself. Bye, my friends.